At 17, I stood in front of a $50 million mansion in Beverly Hills, holding the keys to my parents' dream home. The same parents who had thrown me out on the street with nothing but a backpack and $23 in my pocket just 18 months earlier. But what I did next would change everything, and it wasn't what anyone expected. The rain was coming down hard. The October night in Phoenix, when my stepfather Marcus slammed the front door behind me, the sound echoed through the quiet suburban neighborhood like a gunshot. Stood there on the porch, soaked to the bone, clutching my old JanSport backpack that contained everything I owned in the world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Don't come back until you learn some respect, he yelled through the door. My mother, Patricia, hadn't said a word. She just stood behind him in the hallway, her arms crossed, watching as her only son got kicked out into the storm. The fight had started over something stupid. I'd missed curfew by 2 hours, because I was at the library working on a business plan for my economics class, but Marcus saw it as another act of defiance. He'd been looking for an excuse to get rid of me ever since he married my mom 3 years earlier. It was just the unwanted baggage that came with his new wife. I walked through the rain with nowhere to go. My best friend Jake's house was across town, but I knew his parents barely tolerated me during the days they sure weren't going to let me crash there permanently. The local shelter was full, and I looked too old for the youth programs, but too young for the adult ones. That's when I remembered the abandoned warehouse district downtown. There were dozens of empty buildings that had been sitting vacant since the recession hit. I found a broken window on the ground floor of an old textile factory and climbed inside. The place smelled like mildew and rust, but it was dry. I made a nest out of old cardboard boxes and tried to sleep. The next morning, reality hit hard. I was hungry, dirty, and had no idea how I was going to survive. But as I sat in that empty warehouse, something clicked. I pulled out the business plan I'd been working on, a concept for a mobile car detailing service that would target busy professionals who didn't have time to take their cars to traditional car washes. I'd been fascinated by business since I was 12, reading everything I could get my hands on about entrepreneurs and startups. While other kids were playing video games, I was studying case studies of companies that had started from nothing. My economics teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had always encouraged my interest, even staying after school to help me understand complex financial concepts. But now, sitting in that warehouse, the business plan wasn't just a school project anymore. It was my survival strategy. I walked to the nearest McDonald's and spent $3 on a coffee so I could use their Wi-Fi. For the next 6 hours, I researched everything I could about starting a business in Arizona. I learned about business, licenses, insurance requirements, and tax obligations. I also discovered that there were several programs designed to help young entrepreneurs, including some that provided morale. The problem was, I needed money to start anything. Even a basic car detailing setup would cost at least $500 for supplies and equipment. I had $20 left. That's when I remembered Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived 3 blocks from my old house. She'd always been kind to me, and I'd helped her with yard work a few times when I was younger. I took a chance and knocked on her door. She was shocked to see me looking so rough, and when I explained my situation, she invited me in for lunch. Mrs. Chen had immigrated from Taiwan 40 years earlier with nothing but a suitcase and had built a successful restaurant chain. She understood what it meant to start over. You have the hunger, she said, looking at my business plan. That's the most important ingredient, but you need to think smaller to start. What can you do with $20? She was right. I was thinking too big. Instead of starting a full mobile detailing service, I needed to begin with something simpler. That afternoon, I walked to the nearest Dollar Tree and bought basic car cleaning supplies: soap, sponges, towels, and a spray bottle. Total cost, $15. I spent the rest of the day walking through middle-class neighborhoods, looking for dirty cars and driveways. When I found one, I'd knock on the door and offer to wash it for $10. Most people said no, but by evening, I'd managed to clean 3 cars and earned $30. It wasn't much, but it was a start. More importantly, it proved the concept. worked. I slept in the warehouse again that night, but this time I felt different. I had a plan, and I was already executing it. The next morning, I was back out there, knocking on doors and washing cars. Within a week, I had established a routine. I'd wake up early, shower at the YMCA using their day pass, then spend the morning cleaning cars in residential neighborhoods. In the afternoons, I'd use the public library's computers to research business strategies and reach out to potential commercial clients. The breakthrough came when I approached Sullivan and Associates, a law firm downtown. Their parking lot was full of expensive cars that were covered in dust and desert grime. I offered to clean their entire fleet for $50. The office manager, a sharp woman named Rebecca Martinez, was skeptical at first. But when she saw the quality of my work on her BMW, she was impressed. Not only did she pay me $50, but she also offered me a weekly contract to clean all the cars in their parking lot. That one contract changed everything. Suddenly, I had a guaranteed income of $200 per week. I could afford to upgrade my equipment and start thinking bigger again. I moved out of the warehouse and into a cheap motel room. It wasn't luxury, but it had running water and a bed. More importantly, it gave me a legitimate address to use for business purposes. With my first month's earnings, I invested in better equipment, a pressure washer, professional-grade soap and wax, and a small cart to transport everything. I also printed business cards and created a simple website using a free template. The law firm contract led to referrals. Rebecca mentioned my services to her husband, who worked at a medical practice. Soon I was cleaning cars for doctors, lawyers, and other professionals who appreciated quality work and reliability, but I wanted more than just a car washing business. I was still that kid who dreamed of building something bigger. Every night I'd sit in my motel room and study successful entrepreneurs, trying to understand how they'd scaled their operations. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of my regular clients, Dr. Michael Thompson, mentioned that he was frustrated with his current cleaning service for his medical office. They were unreliable and did mediocre work. That's when I realized I could expand beyond cars. I spent 2 weeks researching commercial cleaning services, learning about the equipment, supplies, and techniques needed for different types of businesses. I also discovered that the profit margins were much higher than car detailing. The work was more consistent. Using my savings from the car washing business, I bought basic commercial cleaning supplies and offered Dr. Thompson a trial run. I cleaned his office for half the price of his current service and did twice the work. He was so impressed that he signed a monthly contract on the spot. Word spread quickly through the medical community. Phoenix had dozens of small medical practices, and most of them were dissatisfied with their current cleaning services. Within 3 months, I had contracts with 8 different medical offices. I was working 16-hour days, but I was making real money. More importantly, I was building something that could grow beyond just my own labor. That's when I made the decision that would change my life forever. Instead of continuing to work alone, I decided to hire employees and scale the business properly. I registered Phoenix Premier Cleaning Services as an LLC, got proper insurance, and started recruiting workers. The first hire was Carlos Mendez, a guy I'd met at the YMCA who was looking for steady work. He was reliable, hardworking, and eager to learn. I taught him everything I knew about commercial cleaning, and within a month, he was handling 3 of my contracts independently. With Carlos handling the day-to-day operations, I could focus on sales and business development. I spent my days visiting potential clients, creating detailed proposals, and building relationships with property managers and business owners. The growth was exponential. By the end of my first year on the streets, Phoenix Premier Cleaning Services had 12 employees and contracts with over 40 businesses. We were cleaning everything from medical offices to retail stores to small office buildings, but the real breakthrough came when I landed a contract with Desert Vista Shopping Center, a major retail complex on the east side of Phoenix. The contract was worth $15,000 per month and required a team of 8 people working night shifts to secure the contract. I had to compete against established companies with decades of experience, but I had something they didn't: hunger and innovation. I presented a detailed plan that included eco-friendly cleaning products, advanced scheduling software, and a quality control system that guaranteed consistent results. The property manager, Janet Williams, was impressed by my presentation and my references. But what really sold her was my willingness to put everything on the line. I offered a performance guarantee. If they weren't completely satisfied with our work in the first 90 days, I'd refund every penny they'd paid us. It was a massive risk. The contract required me to invest in new equipment, hire additional staff, and put up a significant performance bond. If we failed, I'd lose everything I'd built, but I knew we wouldn't fail. I'd learned that success in business wasn't about playing it safe. It was about taking calculated risks and executing flawlessly. The Desert Vista contract was a game changer. Not only did it provide substantial monthly revenue, but it also gave us credibility with other large property owners. Within 6 months, we had contracts with 3 more shopping centers and 2 office complexes. I was 18 years old and running a business with annual revenue approaching $500,000. But I wasn't satisfied. I could see the potential for something much bigger. That's when I started researching the cleaning industry more broadly. I discovered that most cleaning companies were small, family-owned operations that served limited geographic areas. There were very few companies that had successfully scaled across multiple markets. I saw an opportunity to build something different, a technology-driven cleaning company that could operate efficiently across multiple cities. Instead of just competing on price, we'd compete on reliability, quality, and innovation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I started developing systems and processes that could be replicated anywhere. I created training programs, quality control checklists, and customer management software. Everything was designed to be scalable and consistent. The first expansion came when I opened a second location in Tucson. I hired a local manager, transferred some of my Phoenix team to help with the startup, applied the same formula that had worked in Phoenix. Within 6 months, the Tucson operation was profitable and growing rapidly. The systems I'd developed were working exactly as planned. That's when I realized I wasn't just building a cleaning company anymore. I was building a platform that could be applied to any service-based business. The principles of systematic growth, quality control, and technology-driven efficiency could work in dozens of different industries. As I sat in my small apartment in Phoenix, now furnished with actual furniture instead of cardboard boxes, I thought about how far I'd come. 18 months earlier, I'd been sleeping in an abandoned warehouse with nothing but a backpack and a dream. Now, I was running a multi-city operation with over 30 employees and growing revenue. But more importantly, I'd learned that success wasn't about where you started, it was about how willing you were to keep moving forward. Even when everything seemed impossible, I thought about my parents sometimes, wondering if they knew what I'd accomplished. Part of me wanted to prove them wrong, to show them that kicking me out had been the biggest mistake of their lives. But another part of me was grateful. If they hadn't forced me out of my comfort zone, I never would have discovered what I was truly capable of. The struggle had revealed strengths I didn't know I had and taught me lessons no classroom ever could. As I looked toward the future, I knew this was just the beginning. The cleaning business was successful, but it was also just the foundation for something much bigger. I had bigger plans, bigger dreams, and now I had the experience and resources to make them reality. The kid who'd been thrown out in the rain was gone. In his place was a young entrepreneur who understood that every setback was just set up for a comeback. And my comeback was just getting started. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. I was in my Tucson office, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize from Las Vegas. "Is this Tyler Mitchell from Phoenix Premier Cleaning?" The voice was crisp, professional, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is David Chang. I represent a group of investors who've been watching your company's growth. We'd like to meet." I almost hung up. In 18 months of running the business, I'd gotten plenty of calls from people claiming to be investors. Consultants, or business partners. Most turned out to be scammers or desperate salespeople trying to sell me something I didn't need. But something about David's tone made me listen. He knew specific details about my operations or revenue numbers, expansion timeline, even the names of some of our major clients. Information that wasn't publicly available. We're particularly interested in your systematic approach to service delivery, he continued. My clients believe you've cracked a code that most companies in your industry haven't figured out. We arranged to meet the following week at a hotel in Scottsdale. I expected maybe 2 or 3 people in cheap suits with big promises and no capital. Instead, I walked into a conference room filled with 8 impeccably dressed individuals, each representing different aspects of a private equity consortium. David introduced himself as the managing partner of Horizon Growth Partners, a firm that specialized in scaling service-based businesses. The others included a former CEO of a national franchise chain, a technology expert who'd helped digitize several traditional industries, and a financial analyst who'd worked with companies from startup to IPO. Tyler, we've been tracking your growth for 6 months, David said, pulling out a thick folder. Your revenue trajectory is impressive, but what really caught our attention is your customer retention rate.
94%.
Annual retention. In an industry where 50% is considered good, they'd done their homework. The folder contained detailed analysis of our operations, competitive landscape, and growth potential. They'd even interviewed several of our clients without my knowledge, asking about service quality and reliability. Here's what we're proposing, David continued. We provide $2 million in growth capital, plus operational expertise and strategic guidance. In exchange, we want 30% equity and a seat on your board of directors, $2 million. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. With that kind of capital, I could expand to 10 cities within a year. I could invest in technology, hire experienced managers, and build the infrastructure needed for national growth. But I'd also be giving up control. These weren't silent partners. They'd want influence over major decisions. And 30% equity meant they'd profit significantly from my years of grinding. 16-hour days and sleeping on motel room floors. I need time to think about it, I said. Of course. But Tyler, opportunities like this don't come along often. We're not just offering money. We're offering expertise that could help you build something truly significant. At night, I drove through the desert outside Phoenix thinking about the offer. Part of me was tempted to tell them no. I'd built this company from nothing, and the idea of sharing control felt wrong. But another part of me recognized that this could be the catalyst for something much bigger than I could achieve alone. I called my mentor, Mrs. Chen, and explained the situation. She listened quietly and asked a single question. What do you want to build, a successful small business or something that changes an entire industry? The answer was obvious. I wanted to build something that mattered, something that would last long after I was gone. And that required thinking beyond what I could accomplish by myself. 3 weeks later, I signed the partnership agreement. The $2 million hit my business account on a Friday afternoon, and by Monday morning, I was implementing an expansion plan that would have been impossible. Just days earlier, the first major investment was in technology. I hired a team of software developers to build a comprehensive management platform that could handle everything from customer acquisition to quality control. The system would allow us to manage hundreds of locations from a central hub, ensuring consistency while enabling rapid scaling. The second investment was in people. I recruited experienced managers from major service companies, offering them equity stakes and the opportunity to build something revolutionary. Within 2 months, I had a leadership team that included a former McDonald's regional manager, logistics expert from FedEx, and a marketing director who'd helped launch 3 successful franchise concepts. The expansion began immediately. Instead of opening 1 location at a time, we launched in 5 cities simultaneously: Denver, Salt Lake City, Albuquerque, San Antonio, and Oklahoma City. Each location followed the same proven formula, but with local adaptations based on market research and competitive analysis. The growth was explosive. Within 6 months, we were operating in 12 cities with over 200 employees. Revenue jumped from $800,000 annually to $3.2 million. And we were adding new contracts weekly. But success brought new challenges. Managing operations across multiple time zones and markets required systems I'd never needed before. Customer service became more complex when you couldn't personally visit every client. Quality control was harder to maintain, and you weren't physically present to oversee operations. The lowest point came in month 8 of the expansion. Our Houston location was failing badly. Customer complaints were mounting, employee turnover was high, and we were losing money on every contract. The local manager I'd hired had oversold our capabilities and underdelivered on promises. I flew to Houston on a red-eye flight and spent 3 days working alongside our cleaning crews, trying to understand what was going wrong. The problems were deeper than I'd realized. The local market was more competitive than our research had indicated. Our pricing was too high for the service level we were providing. And our training program hadn't adequately prepared employees for the specific challenges of that market. But instead of shutting down the Houston operation, I used it as a learning laboratory. I brought in our best managers from other cities, redesigned our training programs, and implemented new quality control measures. Within 3 months, Houston became one of our most profitable locations. The experience taught me that scaling wasn't just about replicating what worked. It was about adapting and improving systems based on real-world feedback. Every market was different. Every challenge was an opportunity to strengthen the entire organization. By the end of year 2, Phoenix Premier Cleaning Services had become Apex Service Solutions, operating in 18 cities with annual revenue exceeding $8 million. We'd expanded beyond cleaning to include maintenance, landscaping, and security services, creating a comprehensive facilities management platform. The media attention started when Forbes published an article about young entrepreneurs disrupting traditional industries. The piece featured my story prominently, describing how I'd built a multi-million-dollar company before my 20th birthday. The article went viral, leading to interviews with CNN, CNBC, and several business paths. But the real validation came from our competitors. Established companies that had ignored us initially were now trying to copy our model. Some reached out about partnerships, others about acquisitions. A few even tried to poach our key employees with significant salary increases. The acquisition offers started coming in around month 24. The first was from CleanMax, a national chain that offered $15 million for the entire company. ServiceMaster made an offer for $22 million. Finally, a private equity firm called Pinnacle Partners offered $35 million plus performance bonuses that could bring the total to $50 million. I was 20 years old and being offered enough money to never work again. The temptation was enormous. I could buy anything I wanted, travel anywhere, pursue any interest. I could prove to everyone, including my parents, that I'd made it beyond their wildest dreams. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of sleeping in that warehouse, or the lessons I'd learned from Mrs. Chen about building something meaningful. Or maybe it was the realization that I wasn't building this company for money, was building it to prove what was possible when you refused to accept limitations. I turned down all the offers. Instead, I decided to take the company public. And IPO would provide the capital needed for national expansion while allowing me to maintain control. It would also create wealth for the employees who'd helped build the company from the ground up. The IPO process was grueling. Regulatory filings and investor presentations. I spent countless hours with investment bankers, lawyers, and accountants. Learning the complexities of public company management, the roadshow took us to New York, Boston, Chicago, and Los Angeles. I pitched our story to pension funds, mutual funds, and individual investors. Some were skeptical about my age and experience, but the numbers spoke for themselves. We had consistent growth, strong margins, and a scalable business model in a massive market. The IPO launched on a Tuesday. In November, we priced the shares at $18 each, raising $125 million in the initial offering. By the end of the first day, the stock had jumped to $31 per share. Valuing the company at over $400 million, I owned 40% of the shares, making my stake worth approximately $160 million. At 21 years old, I'd become one of the youngest self-made millionaires in American history. The success was surreal. Financial news channels wanted interviews, business schools invited me to speak, and entrepreneurs from around the world reached out for advice. But the moment that mattered most came 3 months after the IPO, when I received an unexpected phone call. It was my mother. "Tyler, is this... Is this really you?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper, filled with uncertainty and something that might have been regret. I hadn't heard from her in over 3 years, not since that rainy night when Marcus threw me out, and she stood silently behind him. "It's me, Mom. I saw you on the news, the business, the stock market thing." I couldn't believe it was my son. I sat in my corner office overlooking downtown Phoenix, watching the sunset paint the desert. Mountains, orange, and purple. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was probably 15 miles from where I'd slept in that abandoned warehouse, but it felt like a different planet. "Your stepfather, Marcus. He's been having some troubles. His construction company went under. Last year, we're behind on the mortgage, and the bank is talking about foreclosure." There it was. It's a real reason for the call. Not pride in my success, not regret over how they'd treated me, but a financial crisis that made her desperate enough to reach out to the son she'd abandoned. "We saw the house," she continued. "The one in the magazine article. That beautiful place in Beverly Hills. And I thought maybe you could help us. Just a loan. Something to help us get back on our feet." The house she was referring to was my latest acquisition at $12 million. It's a mansion in the Hollywood Hills that had been featured in Architectural Digest. I'd bought it primarily as an investment, but also as a symbol of how far I'd come. It was everything my parents had ever dreamed of. 10 bedrooms, a pool overlooking the city, a 3-car garage, and grounds that looked like a resort. "How much do you need?" I asked. "Well, the mortgage is about $180,000 behind, and Marcus has some other debts. Maybe $300,000 total would get us clear." $300,000. It was less than I'd spent on my car. Less than I'd donated to charity the previous month. An amount so small it wouldn't even register on my financial statements. "I'll think about it," I said. "Tyler, please, we're desperate." "I know we made mistakes, but," I said, "I'll think about it." I hung up and stared out the window as the city lights began to twinkle below. Part of me wanted to write the check immediately, to be the bigger person and help the family that had discarded me. But another part of me, the part that had been forged in that warehouse, that had learned to survive on $20 and pure determination, wanted them to feel what I'd felt. That night, I drove to the neighborhood where I'd grown up. The house looked smaller than I remembered, with peeling paint and a yard that needed attention. Marcus's truck was in the driveway, rust eating through the wheel wells. A foreclosure notice was taped to the front door. I sat in my Tesla, watching the house where I'd spent my childhood, made a decision that would surprise everyone, including myself. The next morning, I called my real estate agent in Los Angeles. "I want to sell the Beverly Hills house," I said, "but I have some specific requirements for the sale." 3 weeks later, I arranged to meet my parents at a coffee shop in Scottsdale. They arrived looking nervous and hopeful, dressed in their best clothes but unable to hide the stress lines that had accumulated over the past few years. "Tyler, you look incredible," my mother said, hugging me awkwardly. "So successful, so grown up." Marcus shook my hand stiffly. "We appreciate you meeting with us. We know things didn't end well between us. But I'm not giving you money," I interrupted. Their faces fell. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "But Tyler, we're going to lose everything. The house, our credit, our future. I'm not giving you money," I repeated. "I'm giving you something better." I pulled out a manila envelope and placed it on the table. The deed to a house in Beverly Hills. $12 million, fully paid off. No mortgage, no debt, no strings attached. They stared at the envelope like it might explode. "I don't understand," my mother whispered. "It's yours. It's the house you saw in the magazine, the one you dreamed about. Consider it a gift." Marcus picked up the deed with shaking hands. This is real? You're giving us a $12 million house? Yes, but there's a condition. They looked at each other nervously. What condition? You have to live in it? Both of you? For at least 5 years? No selling, no renting, no using it as collateral. Just live there and think about what it means. Mother is crying now. Tyler, I don't know what to say. This is ... This is incredible. More than we ever dreamed of. There's something else, I said. I've also paid off your debts in Phoenix. All of them. And I've set up a trust fund that will cover your living expenses for the next 10 years. They were speechless. Marcus, who had been so quick to kick me out, looked like he'd seen a ghost. My mother reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Tyler, why? After everything we did to you, after how we treated you, why are you doing this? I looked at both of them, these people who had shaped my childhood and then abandoned me when I needed them most. Because you gave me the greatest gift anyone could give me. You forced me to discover who I really was. I don't understand. If you hadn't kicked me out, I never would have learned what I was capable of. I would have been comfortable, safe, ordinary. Instead, you made me hungry. You made me prove myself. You gave me a reason to build something extraordinary. I stood up to leave. The house is ready for you to move in whenever you want. The keys are with the real estate agent. Her card is in the envelope. Tyler, wait, my mother called. Will we... Will we see you again? I paused at the door. Maybe, but not because you need something from me. If you want to know who I've become. They'd moved to Beverly Hills and were slowly adjusting to their new life. Marcus had enrolled in community college to study business management. My mother had started volunteering at a local homeless shelter, working with families who had lost their homes. I think about you every day, she wrote. Not the successful businessman from the magazines, but the 16-year-old boy we failed. I understand now what we took from you, and I understand what we gave you. I'm not sure which was more important. The letter continued. Marcus and I are seeing a counselor together. We're trying to understand how we became the kind of people who could abandon their own child. We're trying to become better people, people who might someday deserve the gift you've given us. I kept the letter in my desk drawer and read it whenever I needed to remember where I'd come from. The business continued to grow. Apex Service Solutions expanded internationally, opening locations in Canada, the UK, and Australia. We went from a cleaning company to a comprehensive facilities management corporation, employing over 5,000 people worldwide. But the real success came from the culture we'd built. Every employee knew the story of how the company started, how a homeless teenager had built something from nothing through determination and smart decisions. We hired people who had been written off by others, ex-convicts, high school dropouts, immigrants who couldn't find work elsewhere. Our training programs became legendary in the industry. We didn't just teach people how to clean buildings. We taught them how to build careers, how to think like entrepreneurs, how to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. 3 years after the IPO, Forbes named me to their 40 Under 40 list. Harvard Business School wrote a case study about our growth strategy. The president invited me to speak at a White House summit on entrepreneurship. But the moment that mattered most came when I received a phone call from Mrs. Chen. She was 93 years old and had been diagnosed with cancer. She wanted to see me one last time. I flew to Phoenix that afternoon and found her in her hospital bed, still sharp despite her frail appearance. I'm proud of you, she said, but not for the reasons you think. What do you mean? I'm proud because you didn't let success change who you are. You remembered where you came from, and you used your success to lift others up. That's what real wealth looks like. She passed away 2 weeks later. I spoke at her funeral, telling the story of how a kind elderly woman had given a desperate teenager the advice that changed his life. How she'd taught me that success wasn't about what you accumulated, but about what you contributed. Today, Apex Service Solutions is valued at over $2 billion. I own homes in 5 countries and investments in dozens of companies. I've been featured on magazine covers and invited to speak at conferences around the world, but I still drive through that old neighborhood in Phoenix sometimes, past the warehouse where I slept on cardboard boxes, past the house where I was raised and then rejected. I remember the scared, angry kid who walked through the rain with nothing but a backpack and a dream. That kid taught me that circumstances don't determine destiny, choices do. That failure isn't falling down, it's staying down. That the people who believe in you matter. The person who believes in you most is yourself. My parents still live in the Beverly Hills house. We have dinner together once a month now, slowly rebuilding a relationship that was broken but not destroyed. They're different people than they were that night in Phoenix. And so am I. Marcus recently told me that giving him that house was the smartest thing I ever did. It didn't just change our circumstances, he said. It changed our perspective. Living in luxury we didn't earn made us understand what you accomplished. It made us respect what you built. Last month, I established the Second Chance Foundation, dedicated to helping homeless youth start their own businesses. We provide microloans, mentorship, and training programs. In our first year, we've helped launch over 200 small businesses. Every entrepreneur we support gets the same advice Mrs. Chen gave me. Start small, think big, and never forget that your current situation is temporary if you're willing to work. To change it, the foundation's motto is simple. Your story isn't over, it's just beginning. Because that's what I learned in that warehouse. In those early days when survival meant innovation and determination meant everything, your past doesn't define your future. Your circumstances don't determine your destiny. And sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the best thing that ever happened to you. The rain that soaked me that October night in Phoenix wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning of my empire. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.